Okay. All right, we should be live. So, hi everyone. My name is Mitch Mankin. I'm here from Silicon Valley at Home, and I'm here with Michael Trujillo from the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley.
Hi everyone, thanks Mitch.
All right, thanks all for joining us today. We're very excited to spread the word about the eviction moratoriums that Santa Clara County has recently extended, which frees evictions for non-payment of rent during the COVID-19 emergency. We're also going to discuss some new tenant protections for tenants in San Jose, and we'll take some questions at the end for anything that didn't become clear throughout the presentation. So we know these are very difficult times. We know there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of fear about how we're being affected by this crisis. And the hope is that this new law and this information sharing will protect tenants throughout the county from losing their homes. So the first thing we'd like to do is have Michael go over the basic features of this new law.
Thank you, Mitch. And thanks to SB at Home for helping us host this event. It's really important that people know about the protections that are in place right now. And obviously, they're not helpful unless people know about them and how to use them. So the first thing that people should know about Santa Clara County's eviction moratorium is that the law applies to every residential tenant in Santa Clara County. So small business tenants were and have also been included in the county's eviction moratorium, but it's unclear at this point whether or not that eviction is going to be extended past June 1st. And today we're just going to focus on the residential eviction moratorium. Residential tenants should know that eviction moratorium has been extended. So unless the governor takes further action, the county's eviction moratorium is going to be in place until August 31st. To be protected, tenants do need to provide documentation of lost income or out-of-pocket medical expenses related to the COVID-19 emergency to their landlords. And we'll talk about what documentation means a bit more later on. The moratorium prohibits both evictions for non-payment of rent and no-fault evictions for tenants who have been impacted by COVID-19. So no-fault evictions include evictions carried out for no reason or for reasons unrelated to the tenant's behavior, like wanting to remodel or redevelop the building. Tenants should know that they do still have to pay rent under the eviction moratorium if they can. So following the emergency, tenants will have 12 months to pay any back rent unpaid during the emergency. And we're still waiting for the final word on that from the supervisors. Tenants may need to make quarterly payments under the Santa Clara County's law. But tenants in San Jose must pay 50% of the back rent that they owe within 6 months. And then the other 50% of the back rent that they owe within 12 months. So tenants in San Jose must also be notified of their rights before signing any payment plan that commits them to pay back that amount sooner than the 6-month and 12-month schedule that I just described. So be sure to look out for that notice if you're a tenant and are approached with a payment plan. Tenants should also know about the Santa Clara County eviction moratorium and the San Jose eviction moratorium that landlords are prohibited from charging any late fees for any back rent owed during the moratorium period. So any landlord seeking to evict during the emergency must notify tenants of their rights under the moratorium, as well as emergency rental assistance resources. And the eviction can't go forward if the tenant at that point provides documentation of lost income or out-of-pocket medical expenses from COVID-19. Finally, tenants in San Jose should know that they have additional protections that have been implemented since the moratorium first took effect. So first, tenants are protected against retaliation from their landlord for claiming the protection of the eviction moratorium. Additionally, landlords are prohibited from serving an eviction notice on tenants in bad faith, meaning where they have reason to believe that the tenant has been impacted by COVID-19 and needs to rely on the eviction moratorium, as well, and landlords are also prohibited from trying to get a tenant to leave through fraud, intimidation, or coercion. Finally, tenants in San Jose should know that all units in the city are temporarily covered by the city's tenant protection ordinance and the just cause protection that ordinance provides. So that means that single family homes, condos, duplexes, and even affordable housing have to apply by that tenant protection ordinance.
Great. Thanks, Michael, for going over those basics. And if you're just joining us, I just want to let you know that this will be recorded and available on the Facebook page, as well as we'll put it up on the SC at Home YouTube channel. So you'll have a chance to get anything that you missed. But hopefully any questions you have will be answered throughout the question and answer section as well. So those are the basics. Let's talk about some of the more detailed questions that you've been getting about the ordinance. First up, what counts as loss of income or medical expenses?
So loss of income includes job loss, having your hours cut at work, losing clients or customers because you're self-employed. It also includes having to work less because you have to take care of a sick relative or provide childcare since schools have been closed. You will also be protected under the ordinance if you can show that you've had substantial out-of-pocket medical expenses related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Either way, you will need to provide documentation that shows that loss of income or out-of-pocket medical expenses from COVID-19 to your landlord. And you should try to provide that documentation to your landlord before your rent becomes due. So some examples of acceptable documentation include documents showing you lost your job, like a letter from your former employer or an application for unemployment. A document showing that your employer has closed their business may also work in that respect. You could also show that you have suffered reduced hours by presenting a previous month's pay stubs, comparing those to recent pay stubs or time cards, or showing canceled orders, canceled or reduced orders, or reduced requests for services. You should also be able to show documents proving that your child's school has been closed and that consequently you have to stay home to provide childcare. Finally, tenants in San Jose should know that they have the option of completing an affidavit, or which is a form that you fill out and swear to be true by signing it under penalty of perjury if you can't provide any of the documentation that I just mentioned. So that form is available on the Housing Department's website on their page titled Eviction Moratorium in San Jose. So tenants should know that they could send any of the documentation I just described via email or text if necessary. And finally, tenants should contact us at 408-280-2424 if you have any questions about what documentation you may need to provide, or questions about what documentation your landlord may be requesting from you.
And in addition to that, we've dropped a link to the Law Foundation's resource page, as well as the San Jose Eviction Moratorium information page. That's in the chat on the webinar. It's also in the comments on the Silicon Valley at Home Facebook page live stream. So the next question we have here is, are there times when evictions are legal, even if you can show financial hardship from the crisis?
So yes, potentially. The eviction moratorium only protects against evictions related to loss of income related to the coronavirus crisis, and no-fault eviction for tenants who have been impacted by the crisis. Additionally, the California Judicial Council has issued an emergency rule of court prohibiting any evictions from going forward unless they are necessary for a health and safety reason. So this means that your landlord can only give you an eviction notice for something that you did that created a health and safety issue at the property. If you receive a notice like this, please contact us at 408-280-2424.
So should tenants pay their rent while the moratorium is in effect?
Yes, definitely. The eviction moratorium only prevents your landlord from evicting you while the public health crisis continues. It doesn't waive any rent payments or stop you from having to pay rent. It just means that while the public health crisis exists, your landlord can't evict you for not paying rent. So if you're able to pay rent, you should pay rent even if it's a partial amount. Make sure you keep a record of any rent that you do pay. And you can do that by, for example, getting a receipt, taking a picture, or just getting confirmation that your payment was received in a text.
And how will this work once the moratorium ends? Will tenants owe all the back rent?
Yes. Once the moratorium ends, you will have 12 months to pay back rent that was unpaid during the moratorium. So tenants in San Jose must pay 50% of what they owe in 6 months, and the other 50% of what they owe in 12 months. Other tenants in Santa Clara County may have to make quarterly payments, but that's still being worked out by the Board of Supervisors. This is one reason to pay, this need for repayment is one reason to pay as much as you can in rent while the moratorium is still in effect. You don't want to end up with a giant debt that you can't pay once the moratorium ends. But remember, your landlord cannot charge late fees during this time.
Okay, so another concern we've been hearing from tenants, what should a tenant do if they're asked to sign an agreement or a payment plan that asks them to pay back the back rent sooner than the 12 months period?
So under current law, any agreement reached between a landlord and a tenant to pay the back rent owed will apply in place of the repayment schedule in the eviction moratorium ordinance. Therefore, you should think carefully before signing any agreement and make sure you have read through and understand all of the terms that it includes. You should seek legal assistance if you do not fully understand what you're being asked to sign, and you should never sign an agreement that you do not think you'd be able to uphold. Landlords in San Jose are required to provide a notice of tenants' rights under the eviction moratorium with any payment plan agreement that they ask tenants to sign. And if the landlord doesn't provide this notice, the agreement is unenforceable. So tenants should make sure that they have received this notice and can check if they've received this notice by reviewing the copy of the notice available on San Jose Housing Department's website.
Okay, so what should people do if they receive an eviction notice?
So the first thing that you should do if you receive an eviction notice is to read the notice thoroughly and look for the reason your landlord is giving you the notice. The reason must be stated in the notice or else it is void and not effected. Second, if the notice is for non-payment of rent and you can't pay rent, you should provide your landlord with documentation of lost income, as we discussed earlier. This will allow you to access the protections of the county's eviction moratorium. And remember, you can send in that documentation via email or text if necessary.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
One more thing. So if you, after reading the notice, if you read through it and see that the landlord is seeking to evict you for another reason, say because of something that went on to the property or some damage that was done to the property, you should seek legal assistance immediately. And you can contact us at the Law Foundation at 408-280-2424.
Okay, so another situation we've heard about, what should tenants do if the landlord locks them out with that notice?
So even outside of an emergency or the eviction moratorium we're discussing today, it's always illegal for a landlord to lock out a tenant without going through the proper judicial process. So if you are locked out or your landlord is threatening to lock you out without going through the court process, please contact us at the Law Foundation. Again, our number is 408-280-2424.
Okay, thank you, Michael. That concludes our presentation portion. So now we're going to switch to Q&A. So I see we already have some questions here in the Zoom webinar. Also, if you are on the Facebook page, on Silicon Valley Homes Facebook page, you can ask questions in the comments there as well. I'll be looking through those. Let's see what some of the people have asked so far. So one attendee asks, are people who don't have a written lease agreement also protected?
Yes. So the county's eviction moratorium applies to any tenant, whether their lease or rental agreement is oral or in writing. So this includes month-to-month tenants and people who don't have a year-long or other written lease.
Okay. So we have another question here. So someone's landlord sent them an email recommending that they set up automatic payments in the tenant portal. Is that appropriate during the moratorium? And it says it defaults to asking for a credit card for payment. You have to scroll down to figure out how to use your checking account.
Yeah, so the eviction moratorium doesn't have any rules around how rent is or can be paid during the moratorium. However, if you have claimed the protections of the moratorium, then your landlord should be abiding by that. And if you live in San Jose, would need to provide you a notice of your rights under the eviction moratorium and the repayment schedule provided in that, if they're seeking to have you pay your back rent earlier than what the moratorium provides. So it's more about the timing than the method of payment. And there are potentially some negative consequences to your credit if you do choose to put a rental payment on a credit card, and that becomes, and you default on that payment. So I caution tenants against putting rental payments on their credit cards, just because of the long-term consequences that could create.
Okay. So we have another question. Will the City of San Jose tenant notice to the landlord template be updated with the extended date? And actually, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to put in the link to San Jose's page once more, since we had some new people join us. But go ahead, Michael.
Yes, so there are 2 notices now posted to San Jose's housing website. The first is for landlords who are seeking to evict a tenant. And in that case, the landlord has to provide a copy of the notice explaining all the tenant's rights under the eviction moratorium, what emergency assistance resources are available, and then the second kind of notice that the landlord needs to provide, and that is also posted on the San Jose Housing Department website, is the notice that is required before a landlord seeks to have a tenant sign a payment plan. And so that notice is a separate form that's, again, also available on the Housing Department's website, and that lays out very clearly the repayment schedule that tenants are entitled to under San Jose's eviction moratorium. So there's slightly different notices for slightly different situations, but both forms are now available in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, on the Housing Department's website.
Great. So the next question we got here is, what happens if a 60-day eviction was given to us in February? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the judicial council order there, if it's relevant.
Right. So this depends a little bit on whether or not you live in San Jose. But as Mitch mentioned, the first thing to note is that the Judicial Council's emergency rule of court, which prohibits any eviction from going forward that's not related to health and safety concern, for 90 days until after the expiration of the governor's declaration of a state of emergency, would prohibit those no-cause evictions from going forward. So that's the first thing to note. In addition, because San Jose's eviction moratorium extends the protections of the tenant protection ordinance to tenants, landlords are actually prohibited from serving any kind of no-cause notice. They have to affirmatively identify one of the 13 just causes laid out in San Jose's tenant protection ordinance in order for the notice to be valid. Technically, under the county's moratorium, so if you live outside of San Jose and you get a 60-day notice that expires after the moratorium expires, that notice is valid. And so you should seek legal assistance if you do receive a no-cause notice that's going to expire after the expiration of the eviction moratoriums. However, if you received a 60-day notice in February, that's not going to expire before the eviction moratoriums are up, so it's not going to be an effective notice. And the landlord would have to provide you a new notice in order to move forward with an eviction.
I see. So a couple people have asked about if they're renting a room from someone, but those are the people who are on the lease, can that person evict them? And I saw another question that might actually be just whether if you're renting a room, can someone evict you?
No, so the eviction moratorium does apply to all tenants and subtenants. So even if you're not the main person on the lease and you're just renting a room, in someone else's apartment, you're still protected under the county's eviction moratorium.
Okay. Someone else asks whether the moratorium covers homeowners.
It doesn't cover homeowners. There are some protections in place around foreclosure right now through the Federal CARES Act, but you would need to see if your mortgage is federally backed. And so you'd need to probably consult with your lender to see if those protections apply. But the eviction moratorium in Santa Clara County and San Jose are available only to tenants.
Okay. So does the Law Foundation have a draft letter that can be used for tenants, or a letter that they can provide for their landlords about not being able to pay their rent?
Yes, we do. So on our website at lawfoundation.org/coronavirus, we have a lot of resources on all things coronavirus, but we also do have template letters that tenants can just fill out with their information and submit to their landlord, along with the appropriate documentation that I explained earlier in order to be covered under the eviction moratorium.
Okay. So we have a question here about Sunnyvale's moratorium. So their moratorium is extended until June 30th. Do tenants have to pay July, or is July part of the 180 days? It's like there's a question here about the difference between moratorium being in effect and the back rent repayment period.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first, I'll point out that we're expecting the Santa Clara County's eviction moratorium to be extended to August 31st, unless the governor takes action. So that would, because it applies even within city boundaries, tenants in Sunnyvale will be able to claim the protection of the county's eviction moratorium even after that June 30th expiration date in Sunnyvale. As for when the actual what tenants will owe when the actual moratoriums do expire, it's important to make a distinction between the back rent that you owe as a result of not paying rent during the eviction moratorium and your normal rent payments. So your normal rent payments will resume and become due as normal as soon as the eviction moratorium expires. And you can be evicted for not resuming those payments. However, the back rent that you didn't pay while the moratorium was in effect, you will have additional time to pay, up to 1 year. And again, tenants in San Jose will have to pay 50% within 6 months and the other 50% within 12 months. And we're still waiting on a final decision from the Board of Supervisors, but it looks like other tenants in Santa Clara County will have 12 months to repay their back rent under the county's eviction moratorium, but may need to make payments on a quarterly basis. Again, we're still waiting to get the final word on that.
I see. So we have a question here. If the governor doesn't extend the executive order beyond May 31st, will the county level or city moratorium safeguard tenants?
So the counties.
I think that's a secondary question, by the way.
Okay. So regardless of what the governor does, the Santa Clara County has indicated that it will extend its residential eviction moratorium. And it has the power to do that and to make it apply countywide, even within city boundaries, without the governor taking any further action. As I mentioned briefly at the beginning of our presentation, that's not true for commercial small business tenants who have also been covered under the county's eviction moratorium. So without further action from the governor, the county's commercial small business eviction moratorium will be expiring on May 31st.
Okay. So I have a question here. Does the moratorium only apply to people affected by COVID-19? A landlord can still evict someone if they can't pay rent, right? And also, are there any protections for people who are disabled?
So yes, the moratorium is only available for people who have been impacted by COVID-19, but the definition of impact includes people who've suffered out-of-pocket medical expenses because you or a family member has been sick, but also folks who have suffered job loss or loss of income because of either the virus itself or the public health orders associated with the coronavirus pandemic. Let's see. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Does that answer the question?
I believe so.
Okay.
Oh, I guess the other part of the question was whether there are protections for people who are disabled.
Oh, right. Knew I was missing something. So, in general, there are protections in fair housing and civil rights law for people with disabilities. If you do have a disability-related concern about accessing the eviction moratorium's protections or communicating with your landlord or any notices you've received from your landlord, I encourage you to seek legal assistance. The Law Foundation does a lot of work around representing individuals with disabilities so that they can access the goods and services they need. So please contact us at 408-280-2424 if you do have a disability-related concern related to your housing.
Okay, I have another question here. Does the ordinance apply to apartments with less than 3 units? I think the answer is yes, right?
Right. So unlike the tenant protection ordinance in San Jose, both ordinances apply to all rental units within the county.
Right. Okay, so we have another question here. We don't have a problem paying rent, but our landlord wants to demolish the house and is asking when we can leave. He hasn't given us any notice in writing yet. How are we protected if he serves the notice?
So the Santa Clara County's eviction moratorium does protect against no-fault evictions, like the one that you're describing, where the landlord wants to evict tenants so that they can tear down the building. So if you are served a notice with that kind of cause, you can provide documentation of lost income from COVID-19 to your landlord, and the landlord would be prohibited from going forward with that eviction.
Okay, we have another question. What should we do if our landlord is demanding rent payment, even though we have said we are experiencing hardship due to COVID-19? The landlord is saying that our proof of hardship is insufficient and is demanding more proof.
So if this tenant is in San Jose, they should know that there are additional tenant protections in San Jose's ordinance against some of those behaviors. So, if the tenant feels that this is retaliatory, the landlord is taking this action and harassing them because of the fact that they've claimed the protections in the eviction moratorium, then that's illegal under this San Jose's eviction moratorium. Landlords are also prohibited from trying to get a tenant to leave through fraud, intimidation, or coercion. So any of that action as well is prohibited. And tenants should seek legal assistance if they feel like they're experiencing some of those behaviors. So please contact us or the San Jose Housing Department. Again, our number is 408-280-2424.
Okay, so we are basically at time here. So maybe for anyone who has a question that hasn't been answered yet, Michael, can you give them where they should go to ask that question?
Yes, our intake lines are open. And so we do strive to, we have people live answering the phone, answering questions throughout the day, and strive to return any calls we can't get to immediately within one business day. So please call us at 280-2424. We've got folks waiting to answer your call and respond to your questions. And I would also direct people to our coronavirus resources page on the Law Foundation website, where we have a lot of FAQs and materials and resources for folks about the eviction moratorium, and as well as a host of other resources related to the pandemic.
Okay, and I've also posted that number both in the chat here and also on the Facebook live stream. So if anyone doesn't have it written down, you can find it there. Okay, well, thanks so much for your time, Michael. I appreciate you taking the time. I do want to mention to everyone that there will be versions of this info session in Spanish and Vietnamese as well. We're going to do the Spanish version at 2:30 p.m. today and the Vietnamese version at 3:30 p.m. today. So if you know anyone who would like to have those resources in those languages, please let them know. You can find the links to those webinars on the webinar page that you used to sign up for this. And they should also be on the Silicon Valley at Home website under events. Any closing thoughts, Michael?
I just want to thank you and SB at Home for helping us get the word out today. It's critically important as June 1st comes up that people know, the protections that they have and know how to access them.
Yes, thanks, Michael. Yeah, it's extremely important that the knowledge of the law gets out there, both to landlords and tenants, so that everyone has clear expectations about what's going on, and it avoids fear and uncertainty. So if you have friends that have questions about this, you can send them the link to this webinar or this Facebook Live. We'll put it up on YouTube as well, or the Law Foundation's page and the San Jose City's page. Both have information about the Santa Clara County and the San Jose moratoriums. So thanks so much for joining us, and maybe we'll see some of you on the Spanish and Vietnamese ones soon. All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.